are you? Apparently I've had a little too much coffee, but it's good to see y'all. Welcome. This is one of my favorite days of the year. We're baptizing. We've been baptizing all summer, actually, and had a lot. But today we got more, and it's just a lot of fun. I hope you can take 15 minutes after service and hang out with us. It's going to be a lot of fun. Welcome. My name is Troy. I'm one of the pastors here, and good to see you out here on another beautiful Sunday here in Steamboat. There was something a little different this morning. Did you guys notice that cute little girl that was singing up here, man? Someone get me her number, man. That's my wife, actually. She used to be our leader, but we have a new guy. His name is Ben. And if you hadn't heard, he got married this last Saturday. And so, yeah, it was great. And he's out of town. He's predisposed right now. So Julie filled in. And that was kind of a little flashback to the old days for us. But good to hear her singing Carrie Underwood. She reminded me of Carrie Underwood in that first song. But hey, so speaking of family and my wife, if your family is anything like our family, you probably have rules for your kids at your house, right? I mean, you probably have some rules. At our house, we just have a few. Don't lie, don't hit, clean up your mess, and honor your mother. Right? Those are the four, and we have found that, they seem to make life better around our house when we kind of do those things, and so those are our rules. Now, to be clear, those rules do not apply to our neighbor kids. Some of them are here this morning. I would love to give those kids some rules and my rules, but they're not my kids. They probably have your own rules, right? These are only for my kids. But here's a thought that I bet you've never had before when it comes to rules. And if you're keeping notes, you might want to write this down because this is kind of profound. Here it is. Julie and I, did not have children so that there would be someone to keep our rules. Let me repeat that we didn't have kids so that there would be someone to follow our rules. I wasn't like, hey, Julie, we got these great rules that we put together. You know what? We should have some children so that they can follow our rules. Wouldn't that be cool? That's not how it worked. Here's how it worked. The children came first, and then the rules came after. No one's writing that down. I thought that was kind of profound. Maybe you're processing it. I'll come back to that in a few minutes. So we're concluding and wrapping up our little series that we started a couple weeks ago called Heaven. Talking about heaven. Who's in? How do you get in? What do you got to do to make it there? And if this is your first time, or maybe the first time in a while, let me catch you up real quick. Here's what we've talked about. Most people believe in an afterlife. Most people just have this instinct that they're born with, a sense that there is more to this world than what we can see. And surveys show this. It's fascinating that most Americans believe in heaven. Not all Americans believe in God, or we agree on who God is or what he does, but most Americans believe in heaven, and they assume they're going there when it's all over. And they assume this because they're convinced of two simple things. Number one, they're convinced that good people get to go to heaven, and number two, I'm a good person. That's the thought. They assume they're going because they're convinced of those two things. People believe those two things primarily because it makes sense to us. It seems fair, right? It seems right. I mean, if you live a good life and if you do good things, then it's only fair that you get to go to the good place when it's all over. And this thing also supports the idea and the concept, the notion that God is good, right? I mean, this makes sense. Most people think that if there is a God, then he's probably good, and it makes sense that he would want to populate heaven with good people. And now, the other reason that people lean into this theory is pretty obvious, and that is that you make the cut under this condition, right? You're in. Why? Because you're a good person, right? I mean, you're not perfect. None of us are perfect. We know that. But you're better than average, right? I mean, you're a good person. You're not sure where the cutoff actually is, but you know that you're a good person, especially compared to you know who. Or or those people. We all kind of compare ourselves, and this is how most people think. This is how most of your neighbors, your family members, your friends, most people in our world think those things. But here's the problem with this, as we've been talking about. When you kind of get a little bit beneath the surface of this idea or this philosophy, you find that there's some holes in it. That it doesn't really, it doesn't make sense. It falls apart pretty quickly. To begin with, good is a moving target. Right? We talked about this in the first week, so I won't now, but suffice it to say, no one really agrees on what good is. Not everyone agrees on what good is. I mean, historically, what was good 1,000 years ago isn't good today. Culturally, cultures disagree. What some cultures say is good, we kind of go, no, that's not so good. In fact, we look at some cultures and say, wait a second, you can't treat children that way. You can't treat women that way. You can't treat people. And then they're like, no, that's fine. That's how we do it. My point is that there isn't a universally agreed upon standard for what good actually is, right? And now some people, some of you may hear say, the Bible, that's our standard for goodness. But here's the thing, the Bible really isn't helpful in this respect because, for example, the Old Testament, if you read the Old Testament, it doesn't really even mention heaven. And so it doesn't tell us how to get that. And in the New Testament, now, New Testament talks about heaven a lot, but it also tells us over and over again that no one is good enough to get into heaven. The New Testament tells us that we have all fallen short of God's standard to make it in. So if you're looking for an answer of how good is good enough, the Bible doesn't really help us, which brings up another issue. And we've talked about this, and that is this. Don't miss this. If good people get to go to heaven, then why hasn't God made it more clear about how good you and I actually need to be? I mean, really, what's the standard? Is it 70% good that we get in, or is it 50? We don't know. I mean, how good? If good people get to go to heaven, but God hasn't told us how good we need to be, then I would suggest to you that God's not good. Because that's not fair. It's like he's teasing us. Yeah, you get to go if you're good. And we're like, well, how good? And he's like, I'm not going to tell you. And we're like, what? I mean, he should make it clear where we are in the process. Am I one or two good deeds away from getting in? Tipping the scales, or am I a mile away? How do I know? We're not told. And so, and then we talked about this last week. And that is this, think about this. If only good people are going to heaven, then Jesus was mistaken. Jesus was wrong. I mean, because if you read the Gospels, Jesus didn't teach that good people go to heaven. In fact, Jesus kind of implied that bad people go to heaven, which is the opposite. And then not only that, Jesus raised the bar on what's good to such a high place that he made us all look bad. I mean, none of us, he said, he's preaching, you have heard it said that this is the standard, but I say to you, it's worse than you thought. No one's, for example, one of the things that he did is this, let me ask you this. Have you ever mistreated another person? Anybody? Yeah, 2 of you raised your hand, whatever. The answer is yes, of course you and I have hurt and said and done things. And according to Jesus, that is a sin. And according to Jesus, you cannot be right with God if you have mistreated people that God loves. You're not right with God if you've hurt people that he loves. Now, if you're not a Christian, you like hearing that, because the one thing that irritates you about some Christians is Christians who claim to be right with God, and yet they go out and they mistreat people. Right? They abuse people, and you see that, and you're like, man, that ain't right, and that irritates you. And guess what? That irritated Jesus. It took him to the moon. Jesus had no patience with that old-time religion where you only have to believe in God, but it doesn't really care about people. He didn't like that. And so anyway, here's the thing. According to Jesus, no one is good enough to go to heaven. According to Jesus, good people don't go to heaven. According to Jesus, it's forgiven people who go to heaven. Right? I mean, this is fascinating. Let me explain it this way. Jesus claimed to have the authority to forgive people's sin on God's behalf. Now, that was totally ridiculous to the people that Jesus said that to at the time. When they heard that, they're like, What? Who do you think you are? You can't forget. But here's the thing. After his resurrection, after Jesus came back from the dead, that claim wasn't so ridiculous anymore. I mean, his first century followers, they saw Jesus be brutally beaten and nailed to a cross and crucified. He was killed, and then he was buried. But then they found the tomb empty. And then apparently Jesus appeared to Peter, one of the fishermen that he knew. And then he appeared to the other 12 disciples. And then he appeared to over 500 people who were living in Jerusalem, and they realized, oh my gosh, Jesus is who he claimed to be. I mean, you don't come back from the dead unless something's happening here. And he's claimed who he was who he claimed to be, and therefore he must have the authority to forgive sin on God's behalf. And so that's kind of the opposite of what we talk about. When you think about that idea when it comes to heaven, it makes a lot more sense than the other one, where it's just good people go, right? This kind of makes sense. It's a little bit deal. So we've kind of talked about that. What I want to do today is I want to turn the page a little bit, and I want to talk about, and don't miss this. This is good. You're going to like this. I want to talk about a question that really trips people up when it comes to God and religion. And it's a question that is at the center of all of this confusion about how good do you have to be to get into heaven. Now here's the question, and you've probably asked this before, and perhaps maybe your friends and neighbors, and that is this. If rule keeping won't get you into heaven, then why all the rules? If rule keeping doesn't get us into heaven, I mean, seriously, God made up all these rules. You've read your Bible. It's just chock full of rules and regulations. And God made them up, and he gave them to us ad nauseum, and he was very intentional. Please, you better follow, better do this. And if following those rules isn't about pleasing him and getting into heaven, then what's the point of the rules? Why the rules? What's this all about? I mean, it's all confusing. It's kind of confusing because there's such an emphasis on the rules. You assume that it has to be connected to heaven. Listen to me. This is important. The answer to this question is actually one of the main reasons why you should consider following Jesus. If you're on the outside looking in, you're like, I'm not convinced. The answer to this question is a great reason to consider becoming a follower of Jesus. Not becoming religious, not becoming a Christian, but being a follower of Jesus. And let me show you why. The best place to start with this question is to go back to where all this confusion, I think, began. It began when God gave us the 10 Commandments, or more specifically, he gave the Jewish nation the 10 Commandments. You might remember that, right? This is this list of rules that the Jews had, and many people today swear by them. They think that they should be in schools and they should be on courthouse lawns and all that stuff. But they swear by them, but they don't actually live by them because nobody actually really follows all 10, right? And most people can't even name all 10, even if they're eternity dependent on it. And nobody really knows where they are in the Bible. If where are the 10 Commandments? They're in the Bible. Yeah, that's right. They're in the Bible, but where? Well, let me help you today. Here's where they are. The 10 Commandments first appear in the second book in the Bible, and that book is called Exodus. And Exodus is interesting. It's an interesting story. Good read. It records the history surrounding the ancient Israel's exit or exodus out of slavery from Egypt. Okay, it tells that whole story about how that happened. And before I jump into that Exodus part, let me give you a little background to that. About 2000 BC, maybe 1900 BC, God came to this guy named Abraham. And he told Abraham that he was going to make him famous. In other words, one day, your name, everybody's going to know your name. You're going to be worldwide famous. By the way, how many of you heard of Abraham? Raise your hand. Yeah, we all have pretty much, right? I mean, everybody. And so promises made, promises kept, right? God told him that. But here's the thing. Abraham didn't really care about being famous. That didn't do much for him. Abraham just wanted a family. He was an old man. And him and his wife were barren. They had no children, had no heirs. And he just wanted a family. More than that, all he really wanted was a son. Just wanted one son to pass this on. And God hears this, and God tells him, hey, Abraham, not only am I going to give you a son, but here's the thing you need to know. Your family And he took him outside and he showed him the sky and he said, your family is going to be numerous as there are stars in the sky. Now, this has been hard for Abraham's 70, 80 years old. His wife, she's old too. And God's like, this is how big your family's going to be. And it's interesting. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 6, look at what happens. It says this, that Abraham believed the Lord, and God credited to him as righteousness. Now, you've missed this, but this is brilliant. In other words, in the very beginning of this whole thing, get this, being right with God was always about trusting and believing God's goodness. It wasn't about following the rules and doing good. It was about believing that God was good. Abraham believed the Lord, and God said, you're right. That's all I need from you. That's fascinating. Anyway, Abe eventually has a son, and then he has a family. And one of his great-grandsons, a guy by the name of Joseph, takes the family down to Egypt. Joseph applied for a job. He got like the number 2 position in all of Egypt. He's like number 2, big shot. He's like, come on down, hang out. So the whole family, all these brothers, like 12 brothers and sister family, all come down there. And they're down there, and the family in Egypt multiplies so much so, like rabbits. I mean, just they become so big, so fast, that they make the Egyptians kind of nervous that these guys are going to take over if we don't do something. So the pharaohs, the leader of Egypt, slowly over generations begin to enslave this family, the Israelites. And at some point, this family has been enslaved for 400 years in Egypt. And it's miserable. They are just oppressed. They're beat down. They're used and abused. They're just making bricks out of mud and hay. And that's their whole life. It's just a miserable experience. And so they begin to cry out to God. And God hears their cry to be free. And God raises up another man named Moses. And Moses, you know the story. He goes to Pharaoh. And what does he tell Pharaoh? He says what? 8 of you, let my people go, right? Now, the rest of you know what Pharaoh said. What did Pharaoh say? No, I'm not going to do that. And so after a series of weird plagues and hailstorms and crazy stuff, Pharaoh finally goes, yeah, go. He lets him go. And Israel exits Egypt in a very dramatic way. And finally, this family, this nation that's become a nation now, is on their own. They're free for the first time. I mean, they're on their own. And the problem is that they didn't really have any laws to govern themselves. They didn't have any organization or structure to this. And they were functioning, this is the first time they'd ever functioned independently, where they didn't have a taskmaster over them. And so, and by this time, there was over at least 1 million Jews by that time. And so God sees this, and through Moses, he gives them a constitution. He gives them some civil and moral laws that include some instructions of how to do this and that, and some requirements and some punishments and consequences to breaking these rules. And so I want you to know this. The law that God gave the ancient Israelites was way ahead of its time. It was, I mean, there was nothing like it. Nothing like it existed in the ancient world, and nothing like it existed even in the civilized world for another 1,000 years. It was one of a kind. People had never been given rights and protections before. No one had ever done that. No government ever did that. Personal rights and protections were completely unknown to people before then. In fact, one of the things that the law said is that domination of one human being over another was not permitted by this law, that one couldn't lord over another in this and do that. Now, some of you might go, wait a second, I know they had slavery. Didn't they have slavery? And you're right, they did have slavery. Slavery is allowed, but it was a different kind of slavery than you and I think of. It was more like indentured servitude. If you needed money, you could sell yourself into slavery and make some money and to get caught up if on a debt, and you could raise enough money to buy yourself out of slavery. And there were restrictions on how long you could be saved. Like every 7 years, the slaves were set free. There's this jubilee, and that everybody's debts were forgiven. So my point is that these laws were so far ahead of their time that they became the basis of our own modern law, what we live by today and what we agree on. But here's the thing that no one thinks about, that no one notices and no one thinks about. Don't miss this, and that is this. God did not give them his rules until the 20th chapter of Exodus. The first 19, if you read the story, you can read this. He didn't give it to them until late in the game. The first 19 chapters of Exodus is this story about God demonstrating his love and his care for these people. He's coming to them and he's like, okay, and then he's delivering them from slavery, and then he's setting them free, and he's preparing them to go into their own land, but not because they were following his rules. God didn't do that because they were following his rules. He hadn't given them the rules yet. My point is that he delivered them before he gave them his law, because he wanted to, because he loved them. Now, this is a point that you may not see in the Bible, but it's a principle. It's true. With God, relationship always precedes the rules. With God, relationship always comes first. And it's always more important than the rules. Relationship precedes the rules. God did not give Israel his law in order to start a relationship with him or with them. God gave Israel the law because they were already in relationship with each other. You see, the law wasn't given to them as a condition for them to have a relationship with God. It was a confirmation that they were already in a relationship with God. Do you understand? 3 of you are nodding your heads. Do you guys get this? It wasn't, the tit for tat. It was a different way. And so that's how it is. In the same way, like, let me illustrate this way. I never established rules for my neighbors, the bedtime for my neighbors' kids. Because I just established rules for my kids because I have to live with them. Right? I never tell you how to discipline your kids because I'm not in a relationship. I have discipline. We have rules in my house because I'm in relationship with my kids. My point is that we made rules for our kids and we disciplined our kids because they were our kids. We had to live with them and we were in a relationship with them. First, we had a relationship with them and then we made the rules. That's how it worked. You guys understand that? Okay, well, again, with God, relationship always precedes the rules. And so, in the same way, don't miss this, 2 months after God delivered Israel out of Egypt, after the Exodus, the nation of Israel is camped out at the base of Mount Sinai. You know this story. Moses goes up on the mountain, right? Disappears for a day or so, and he comes back with a constitution for his people. And I want you to listen to how this constitution begins, how it starts out. It doesn't start out like you and I think. It doesn't start out with thou shalt and thou shalt not and don't do that. It doesn't start there. It's fascinating. I want you to listen to the preamble to this ancient constitution, Exodus chapter 20, verse 2. This is how it starts. It says, I am the Lord your God. I am your God and you are my people. In other words, we have a relationship with another one. This is a relationship. I'm your God. You're my people. I am the Lord your God, he said, who, by the way, brought you out of Egypt and out of the land of slavery. In other words, if you want to know who I am and what I'm about, go back about 50 days ago when I came to you and delivered you out of that misery. Do you remember that? Yeah, just a few months ago, you guys had belonged to Pharaoh for hundreds of years. All he did is just use and abuse you, but now you belong to me. And back then, you didn't have any hope. You didn't have any land. You didn't have any freedom. And you didn't have any future. It was just more mud bricks for you. But then I came to you and I pulled you out of all that. I took you out of that life and I did that. Don't miss this, people. I did that without asking anything in return from you. Except one single act of trust. That's all I asked from you. All I asked you to do, remember this, is I asked you to take some blood from a lamb and take that blood, and I wanted you to take that blood and put it on your doorpost. Do you guys remember when I told you to do that? Yeah, that was weird. You're like, why do we got to do that? Yeah, well, that was the night that everything changed for you people. Remember, I totally put the blood. The next day, Pharaoh woke up and said, you guys can go now. In fact, why don't you take all of our gold and all of our silver, just go, please, we're done. Everything changed on that. And you guys, since that time, hopefully you've seen that I have your best interest in mind, that I want to provide for you and I care for you. And so I want you to trust me. I want you to trust me. I want you to follow me, because if you follow me, here's the thing. I will take you to a land of your own. I'll take you to a land flowing with milk and honey. That'll be yours. And so with all of that said, here is the first rule for our family. Verse 3. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not have any other gods in front of me. To which the children of Israel were like, no kidding. Why would we do that? We just saw you, what you did to Egypt's gods. They were very powerful. And man, you wiped them out. I mean, God's message to Pharaoh was, listen, hey, you have something that belongs to me, and I'm not leaving until I get them. I'm not leaving here without them. But Pharaoh pushed back. He's like, no. And so one by one, Israel's invisible God humiliated every one of Egypt's multitude of gods. I mean, he just humiliated them. It was crazy. I mean, they're like, yeah, there is only one God. It's you. We get it. What's next? And then God gives them a next command, and it was amazing, and it was unprecedented. And in fact, it would be another 1,500 years before a civilization would come along and catch up with the wisdom of what is in this next statement, because it makes so much sense. And God says this, I am the Lord your God, and therefore you should not make for yourself an image of me in the form of anything in heaven above, or on earth below, or on the waters below. Some of you are like, what's the big deal? Well, he's saying, listen, you cannot recreate me with your hands. You can't make something that even begins to resemble me and represents me accurately. I'm so much bigger than you can imagine. I'm so much better and than you can imagine. And so anything that you can make, it's just going to fall short. And by the way, you can't contain me. You can't restrain me. You can't control me, which is what a lot of people did with their little gods. You do this. And they would control. And he's like, you can't do that with me. In fact, you can't, a lot of people, you can't hide me in your tent and put me in your tent under your pillow and then go out and do something rotten thinking that I won't see you, because that's not me. I'm everywhere. I can see you. I know everything. I'm all powerful. I am mobile. You can't just keep me in one place and one church and one temple. I am so much bigger than that. I'll break out of that. And so don't do that. It's just stupid. You're turning me into what you want rather than who I really am, and that's bad for you. And so a religious system without idols was totally unheard of at that time. Israel was like, whoa, no idols? How's that even possible? We don't know how to worship without focusing on something, right? And as you know the story, if you read it, they went out and broke that rule pretty quickly. That might have been the first one. I mean, and it was bad. Do you guys remember that? It's like you've never heard this story before. God opened up the earth and swallowed them up when they made that golden calf. It was pretty crazy. Anyway, then God gives them rule number 3. I'm not going to go through all of these, but he says this: don't misuse my name. Don't misrepresent me to your children or to your neighbors. Don't sign my name to something that I didn't say or I didn't do. Don't misrepresent my name. My name is who I am. It's what I want people to know me about. And then he goes this, in number 4, he goes, oh, by the way, I want you all to take a day off. I want you to take a siesta, right? I want you to just relax. I know that everybody else is out there and they got to work. You got to make it. You got to go 7 days a week, because if you fall behind, you're going to die. But I'm going to provide for you. You don't have to. I want you guys to take one day at least and relax and chill. Hang out with your family. Rest. This is my gift to you. Right? And oh, by the way, I want you to give your slaves a day off too. In other words, God was teaching them that every human being was valuable to him. Everyone, not the greatest, not just the greatest, all. In fact, the last 6 commandments, if you know them, were basically related to how they should treat and honor others. Honor your mother and father. Don't steal, don't cheat, don't lie. All that stuff, don't kill. And so in a nutshell, just get this. In a nutshell, God was basically saying to them through the 10 Commandments, listen, honor me because I rescued you. Just give me a little credit for what I did. Put me first because of what I have done for you. Honor me because I rescued you. And oh, by the way, honor others because they are made in my image. They are more connected to me than you know. And oh, please, treat your slaves right. Do them well. Why? Because you were once a slave yourself. And you know how that can be. And therefore, I don't want you to forget where you've come from. And I don't want you to forget what I have done for you. Those are the big 10. That's what they're about. Now, as you know, if you read the rest of the Old Testament, you know there are hundreds of other, like 600 more laws and more commands that come out. And it's just like, wow, why so many? Well, very simply, this was going to be their civil law. This was going to how they're going to organize and deal with disputes. How do you deal with someone when there's a disagreement over property? Or what do you do with mold? Or how should we deal with someone when they get sick? We don't want everyone to get sick. So God comes up with all these laws. Why? Because he cared for them. And he wanted them to thrive. He wanted his family to thrive and to survive. And so he helps them with that. But my bigger point is this, is that with God, relationship always precedes the rules. And if you've read the story, you know this, that the Israelites, it was clear, the Israelites didn't have to behave their way into God's family. Right? They didn't have to behave their way into his family. If you read the story and you know this is true, you know that they weren't able to misbehave their way out of his family either. And they were bad monkeys. If you've read the Old Testament, it's a roller coaster up and down. Sometimes these guys followed God's rules, but most of the time they didn't. And God would stop every now and then. He'd be like, I'll put you guys in timeout. Sorry, but I got to do this. You guys are off the rails, and I'm going to let this country come in. They're going to attack, and you're going to lose your freedom. You're going to lose your freedom. And maybe when you figure it out, and then they would go, oh man, we're sorry, we'll get it right, we want our freedom. And he would do that. And it was just a cycle of that. And so I just want you to know, in spite of their rebellion, their constant flipping the bird to God, we're going to do it our way, God loved them. He was always with them, and he never abandoned them, even though he had a million reasons to go, enough is enough. He never did that. Why? Because they were his people. They were his people. And they were his people before he gave them the commandments, and they were his people after he gave them the commandments. And here's something amazing. What is true of Israel is true for you. That's how God sees it. What is true for them is true for you. And this is the part in the movie, if you're watching a movie, where the music kind of changes. It's been kind of brooding and ominous and dark, and then all of a sudden it starts to lighten up, and you're like, oh, good, finally something's about to happen. This is a point in the movie where it goes from bad to good. If you're sleeping, wake up, because this is going to rock your world. 1,500 years, 1,500 years after Moses led the 12 tribes of Israel out of Egypt, and God gave them the 10 Commandments. 1,500 years after that happened, Jesus gathers with his 12 disciples around a table in the upper room to celebrate the Passover holiday. This is a holiday that the Jews celebrated every year, once a year, and they would remember and celebrate the day that God delivered them out of slavery. They all would stop and pause and remember that. And that night, Jesus is with his disciples, and he says something to them that is so blasphemous that they should have stoned him to death. Or at very least, they should have walked out. It was bad. And Jesus is talking about the Passover, and Luke 22, this is what he says. Don't lose this. This is fascinating. He goes, I want you guys to do this in remembrance of me. In other words, when you do Passover, I want you to remember me. Now, what he said there would be kind of like if I did this on Christmas Eve. I got up in front of you guys on Christmas Eve, and I said, hey, everybody, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for celebrating the birth of Jesus. That's what we're here for. But I just want to make an announcement. From now on, what I want you guys to do is, instead of celebrating Jesus' birthday today, I want you to celebrate mine. Now, if I did that, you would walk out. You go, we can't go to church there. That guy is, he's like, and if you're part of this church, you'd go, we got to fire that fat monkey. He's done. This is too far. He's gone too far finally. And you'd be right. You can't say things like that. But Jesus said this. He said, from now on, when you do the Passover, instead of remembering the Passover, I want you to remember me. And then he says this in verse 20. He goes to another level. He says this cup, he picks up a cup of wine. He says this cup, which you use in the Passover, it represents a new covenant, a new deal between God and man, a new contract between God and man. And this new covenant is in my blood, which is going to be poured out for you. Now, that statement made no sense to them that night. They're like, what? But the next couple of days, what they saw on Calvary, they saw Jesus shed his blood for them and for you and for the whole world. Jesus, in a way, was saying to them, don't miss this. This is so good. He was saying, just as God delivered our people from physical slavery 1,500 years ago through the blood of a lamb put on your doorpost, Jesus said, tomorrow I'm going to deliver the world from their slavery to sin through my blood on a cross. That's how I'm going to do it. And here's the good news. The good news is that the terms and the conditions of this new deal between God and man is the same as it was then. It all starts with a single expression of trust on your part. All you have to do to get in on this deal is trust me. Do you believe me? Do you believe that God is this good and would do this for you to pull you out of your muck? If you've thought about that at all, it's amazing. It's amazing. And this is so amazing, but the problem is it's so simple, and throughout the centuries, people have often misunderstood it or overlooked it because it's just so simple. And so we try to explain it. Apostle Paul explains it in a little letter that he wrote to some Christians in Rome. He tried to do it. And it's funny, just a reminder, Paul was a Pharisee for much of his life, which was, a Pharisee was a strict religious Jewish sect that thought that the way to heaven was to be extra, extra, extra good. It was a bunch of guys that believed that the way we get to heaven is by just being super good. And Paul eventually went, you can't do it. And he got out of that and became a follower of Jesus. But here's the thing. He became a follower of Jesus when he recognized this parallel story. This parallel story between what God did for his nation in Egypt and what God did for the world through Jesus. That it was the same. He's like, OMG. He's doing it again. But only better and bigger. And so Paul basically says, just as God demonstrated his love for Israel 1,500 years ago, Paul says this, God demonstrates his own love for us in this way. That while we were still sinners, while we were still enemies with God, while we were like on the other side and going, no, and I'm going to do it my way, and I'm bad, and I don't care what you do, I'm out. While we were still sinning, while we were not in God's family, God sent Christ to die for us. In other words, before you and I did anything good, before we even knew that something needed to be done, God did something for us. He came to us and he freed us from our own slavery before we even followed even one of his rules. That's what he's saying. It's brilliant. And so, if I can conclude this series, it would be with this. The reason that Jesus' death is such good news is because we couldn't good our way in. We couldn't good our way in. You and I cannot behave our way into God's family any more than my children can behave their way into my family. That's not how it happened. And here's the better news, especially if you're a bad monkey like me. We can't bat our way out. We can't be bad enough to get kicked out. And we can't bat our way out any more than my children can misbehave their way out of my family. They're my children, no matter what, regardless. And this is why Nicodemus, who was a Pharisee who came to Jesus late at night one time, and he asked Jesus, hey, how do I get in? How do I get in? This is why Jesus, when Nicodemus asked that, didn't say, well, Nicodemus, you must behave again. You need to do good. No, instead, Jesus said this, you know this, you must be born again. Why? Because you don't behave your way into your family. You are born into your family. So that's it. So maybe you're here this morning, you're like, oh, that was very interesting, Pastor Troy. Thank you for that very long and boring story. I'm walking out right now. I can't take any more. I get it. I'm hurrying up. I'm coming to my conclusion. But you may be still here going, why all the rules? And here's why. God gave Israel some rules, not because he was trying to make bad people good. You can't do it. It's impossible. No one can be good enough. We know that. God was just simply trying to keep a free people free. He was trying to help them stay free, right? That they would enjoy this planet that he gave to them. He was telling them, this is how you can get the max out of this. Follow my ways on that. And the same is true for you and I. God's desire for us is to enjoy this world that he made for us and to live a life of freedom and abundance. And like it was in the beginning, remember when he came to Adam and Eve, he said, go, enjoy, be fruitful, multiply, enjoy it. It's all yours. Be free. He wanted to get back to that. And so he offered these rules on that. And so my point is don't forget this. You and I have been reconciled to God through grace. We are made right with God because of his grace, not because of us following his rules. That's not how it is. It's through his grace. Now, we choose to follow him and his rules, though, out of gratitude, out of a recognition of, wow, you want me to enjoy this. You made me free. Okay, I'll follow what you say. You might know better. And if you haven't heard this, this is powerful. Jesus made the rules pretty simple. You might know there's hundreds of rules and you can't do it. At that Passover meal, don't forget this. Jesus was talking to his disciples. He took those 10 commandments and he took those 600 laws and he boiled them down to just one. In John 13:34, Jesus said, I'm giving you a new covenant, and so here's a new command. The new command I give you is this. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. As you've seen me love you and care for you and help you, I just want you to do the same for other people, and you're in. That's it. Just do that. I hope you are catching this because Jesus' invitation wasn't an invitation to follow a bunch of rules. That's not what God is inviting us into. Jesus' invitation was an invitation to a relationship, to a friendship, to a partnership, to a family, right? We get into that not because we promise to do better or to be gooder. We get in simply by trusting what he's already done for us. And by naturally passing that on to those who are around us. Let me pray and I'll get you out. Hey, Father, all of us are asking this question on occasion. How do we get in? Who's in? Is this church people? Are they all in just because they go to church? Who's in? Who goes to heaven? That's our question. Well, the answer is forgiven people get to go to heaven. Forgiven people, not perfect, not good, not rule followers, but forgiven people. Well, how in the heck do we find forgiveness? Where do I find forgiveness? Well, through Jesus Christ. He is our Savior. He lived a perfect life, and he paid for my imperfect life with his death, and that squares me away with you. And man, when I hear that, it sounds too easy and so simple, and so I like to complicate it. And so God, help me to never forget that I am in by grace and through forgiveness of what you have done, not on what I can do. And I pray that you would help me and help all of us to share this simple news with others. Not because it's a rule that we have to follow, but that we would share it with others out of our gratitude to you for setting us free. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen. Hey, gang, thanks for coming. It's 11:30. We want to get baptized. I know several of you want to get baptized and prepared. If you did not come prepared to get baptized, but you have decided to follow Jesus, this is the next step for you. Maybe you're like, well, my mama baptized me when I was 3 months old. This is a decision that you get to make, right? She may have made the decision for you, and her intent back then, by the way, was that you would one day exactly do this, that you would follow Jesus. That's why they did it. And so you're actually fulfilling your parents' desire when you get baptized and say, I'm following Christ. So if you want to get baptized, we'd love to do that. We're going to head over to the river. By the way, you just go out to Doherty Road and you walk along the outside of that fence, and then you get to the core trail and you head up about 100 yards on your left. Real beautiful place. We're going to go do that. If you got ready to go get baptized, go get dressed, do that. Did you all have a good day at church today? Man, I love you guys. Thanks for coming. Hope to see you next week. Have a great one, man. God bless you.